They thought I was just another old fool. That was their first mistake. My name is Robert Chen, and I'm 73 years old. I've been banking with Silverstone Financial for 47 years, longer than most of their employees have been alive. I watched them grow from a small community bank into a corporate giant, and somewhere along the way, they forgot that old doesn't mean stupid. It started on a Tuesday morning in September. I remember because Tuesdays were when I always reviewed my accounts, a habit I'd maintained since my days as an accountant. The coffee shop across from my apartment had just opened, and I sat by the window with my laptop, the autumn sun warming my weathered hands as I logged into my banking portal. The balance was wrong. Not dramatically wrong. Not the kind of wrong that makes you panic and call the fraud department immediately. Just off. By $847.32, to be precise. My savings account showed $43,298.14 when it should have shown $44,145.46. Most people would have assumed they'd miscalculated, made a purchase they'd forgotten about, or simply accepted the bank's number as gospel. But I've been tracking every penny for 5 decades. I don't miscalculate. I pulled up my spreadsheet. Yes, I still maintain one, updated daily, and cross-referenced every transaction for the past month. The discrepancy wasn't from my end. According to my records, which I'd meticulously backed up across 3 different platforms, I was right. The bank was wrong. Or worse, the bank was lying. I took a sip of my black coffee and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not fear. Something sharper. Recognition, perhaps. The same feeling I'd had 40 years ago when I'd discovered a client was embezzling from his own company, cooking the books just carefully enough that most auditors would miss it. But I wasn't most auditors. I closed my laptop slowly, my mind already working through the possibilities. A simple error? Perhaps. A system glitch? Possible. But that cold feeling in my chest whispered something else entirely. What if this wasn't an accident? The reasonable thing would have been to call the bank, report the discrepancy, and let them fix it. That's what they'd expect. That's what an old man who didn't understand technology would do. Instead, I smiled. After all, if someone was trying to play games with my money, the least I could do was understand the rules before I flipped the board. The next morning, I arrived at Silverstone Financial's main branch at exactly 9:47 a.m. Not right at opening, that would seem too eager. But early enough to catch the staff before the lunch rush dulled their attention. "Good morning, Mr. Chen." The young teller, Madison, greeted me with that bright, practiced smile they all wore. "How can I help you today?" "Good morning, dear. I noticed a small discrepancy in my savings account. Nothing major, but I wanted to bring it to your attention." I kept my voice gentle, slightly confused, the tone of an elderly man who might be making a mistake but was too polite to be dismissed. Madison's smile never wavered as she pulled up my account. "Let me take a look." "Okay, Mr. Chen, I'm showing a balance of $43,298.14 in your savings account. Does that sound right?" "Well, according to my records, it should be $44,145.46. I seem to be missing $847.32. She frowned at her screen, clicking through several pages. Let me check your transaction history. Okay, I see here that on September 3rd, there was a service fee assessed to your account for $847.32. My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression mildly perplexed. A service fee? For what service? It says here it's a portfolio management advisory fee. Do you recall signing up for any news services recently? No, I don't believe I did. Could you show me the documentation? More clicking. The smile began to strain slightly. Let me get my manager to help us sort this out. Just one moment, please. She disappeared into a back office, and I waited, my hands folded calmly on the counter. Through the glass partition, I could see her speaking with a man in his 40s wearing a gray suit, Derek Northam, the branch manager. I dealt with him before. Slick hair, slicker smile, the kind of man who treated banking like a sales competition. He emerged with Madison, his hand already extended for a shake. Mr. Chen, Madison tells me we have a small question about a fee. Let me take a look and clear this right up for you. He sat at Madison's terminal and pulled up my account with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Ah, yes, I see the issue. This is actually a fee associated with our premium senior services package. You were enrolled in September, and it includes quarterly portfolio reviews, enhanced fraud protection, and priority customer service. I don't recall enrolling in any such package, I said carefully. Well, sir, according to our records, you signed the authorization form on August 28th during your visit to our branch. Perhaps you don't remember? It was explained as part of our new services for valued senior customers. There it was. The lie delivered smoothly, with just enough concern in his voice to make it seem like he was helping me, not gaslighting me. I had not been in the bank on August 28th. I'd been at my daughter's house in Connecticut, helping her repaint her kitchen. I had witnesses, photos, credit card receipts from a hardware store 200 miles away. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I let confusion cloud my features. Oh, well, perhaps you're right. My memory isn't what it used to be. Could I see a copy of this authorization form? Of course. Let me just print that out for you. He typed quickly, then frowned. Typed again. The frown deepened. The system is being a bit slow this morning. Tell you what, why don't I email you a copy by end of day? Would that work? That would be fine, I said. Thank you for your patience with an old man's confusion. No trouble at all, Mr. Chen. That's what we're here for. The smile was back, full force. Is there anything else I can help you with today? No, that's all. Thank you. I left the bank with the same gentle, slightly befuddled expression I'd worn throughout the conversation. But inside, my mind was racing, pieces clicking together with the precision of a mechanical clock. They weren't going to email me that form. The form didn't exist. They'd forged my signature or simply created a false record in their system. And Northam's reaction, the way he'd smoothly pivoted when he couldn't produce the document immediately, that wasn't the response of someone dealing with a simple clerical error. This was intentional. Systematic. And I was willing to bet I wasn't the only one. Back at the coffee shop, I opened my laptop and began to dig. If this was a scheme, there would be patterns. There always were. Criminals, no matter how sophisticated, were creatures of habit. I started with the fee itself, $847.32. An odd number. Not round. That suggested it was calculated as a percentage of something. I pulled out my calculator. If my original balance had been $44,145.46, then $847.32 represented almost exactly 92% of the total. Interesting. But not quite 2%. Why? Unless I checked my account balance from 6 months ago, $42,156.18, and 12 months ago, $39,847.21. The amounts varied, but they all hovered in that same general range, between $39,000 and $45,000. If someone was skimming fees, they'd want to avoid round numbers that might trigger automatic fraud detection. They'd also want to vary the percentage slightly so it wouldn't show up as a pattern in basic audits. But they need to keep it profitable enough to be worth the risk. 1. 92% of $44,145. 46 was $847. 19. Close enough to $847. 32 when you factored in some randomization algorithm. I spent the next 3 hours building a model. If Silverstone was doing this to me, they were doing it to others. Probably targeting accounts with specific characteristics. Elderly account holders, balances large enough to make the skim worthwhile but small enough not to trigger high net worth protections, customers with long histories of stable, predictable banking who wouldn't be likely to scrutinize every statement. People like me. People they thought wouldn't notice or wouldn't fight back. My phone buzzed. An email from Derek Northam. Mr. Chen, I apologize for the delay. Our document system is undergoing maintenance, and I'm unable to retrieve the authorization form at this time. I've escalated this to our corporate office and will have it to you within 3 to 5 business days. Thank you for your patience. I read it twice, then smiled grimly. 3 to 5 business days. Time to forge a document that would pass cursory inspection. Time for me to forget about it, to let it slip through the cracks of my supposedly failing memory. They really did think I was a fool. I opened a new document and began to write down everything I knew, everything I suspected, and everything I needed to prove. This wasn't just about $847.32 anymore. This was about principle. This was about every elderly person they'd scammed, everyone they'd dismissed as too old, too confused, too powerless to fight back. They'd chosen the wrong old man. I spent the next week becoming invisible. Not literally, of course. I'm too old and too tall for that, but invisible in the way that matters. I became background noise, just another elderly customer shuffling through the bank, asking simple questions, making small talk with tellers. I learned their schedules. Madison worked Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings. Derek Northam was rarely in before 10 a.m. but stayed until 6 p.m. most evenings. There were 3 other tellers, 2 personal bankers, and a security guard named Marcus who spent more time on his phone than watching the cameras. I also learned something more valuable. I wasn't alone. On Thursday afternoon, I struck up a conversation with another elderly man in line, Harold Brennan. 78 years old, retired postal worker, been banking with Silverstone for 32 years. We chatted about the weather, grandchildren, the rising cost of everything. Then, casually, I mentioned I'd noticed some confusion with fees on my account. His eyes sharpened immediately. Fees? What kind of fees? Oh, something about a senior services package. Nearly $850. I don't recall signing up for it, but they say I did. Harold's jaw tightened. Son of a bitch. They got you too. Too? He glanced around, then lowered his voice. Happened to me 3 months ago. $623. They called it an enhanced security service fee. Said I'd authorized it online. Mr. Chen, I don't even own a computer. When I pushed back, they made me feel like I was losing my mind, like maybe my grandson had done it or I'd forgotten. Eventually, I let it go. My hands clenched around my cane. Did you tell anyone? File a complaint? I called their customer service line. Got bounced around to 4 different departments, spent 2 hours on hold. Finally spoke to someone who said they'd look into it, but I never heard back. I thought about going to a lawyer, but for $623? The lawyer would cost more than that. Harold, I said quietly, may I have your phone number? I think we might be able to help each other. We exchanged information, and I left the bank with a new purpose. That evening, I called Harold back and asked him for every detail he could remember, dates, amounts, the names of employees he'd spoken with, anything. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my old colleague, Patricia Vance. Patricia and I had worked together at Morrison and Associates for 15 years before we both retired. She'd been a forensic accountant specializing in financial fraud, and she'd been brilliant at it, the kind of mind that could spot a single anomaly in thousands of pages of data. We'd kept in touch over the years, Christmas cards and occasional coffee, but I hadn't spoken to her in over 6 months. Robert Chen, she answered, her voice warm with surprise. This better be good. You're interrupting my evening wine. I need your help with something. Hypothetically, if a bank was systematically stealing from elderly customers to fake fees, how would they structure it to avoid detection? There was a pause. That's a hell of a hypothetical. Should I be sitting down? You might want to. I spent the next hour explaining everything, the discrepancy, Harold's case, my theories about the percentage-based skimming and the targeting of specific demographics. Patricia listened without interrupting, which meant she was taking it seriously. Okay, she finally said. First question, are you sure this isn't just incompetence? Banks screw up all the time. The branch manager claimed I signed an authorization form on a day when I was 200 miles away, then mysteriously couldn't produce the form. That's not incompetence. Fair point. Second question, how far down the rabbit hole are you willing to go? I thought about Harold's face, the resignation in his voice when he'd said he let it go. I thought about how many other people like us there might be, people who'd been made to feel foolish for questioning their bank. All the way, I said. Good. Because if you're right, this isn't just your branch. This is organizational. And if it's organizational, there's a trail. We need to find more victims, document everything, and build the case so airtight that they can't wiggle out of it. How do we find more victims? That's the tricky part. We need access to account data, and you're not getting that without a subpoena. But... She paused, and I could practically hear her mind working. You've been with this bank for decades, right? You probably know other long-term customers. I do. Start there. Talk to them. Be casual about it, don't lead the witness. Just mention you had some confusion about fees and see if anyone else has had similar experiences. Build a list. Get details. We need at least 10 cases to establish a pattern, 20 to make it bulletproof. What if they've made people sign NDAs? Some of them might have gotten settlements. Even better. If they're settling, that means they know they're guilty. But NDA or not, people can still talk to law enforcement or regulatory agencies. We just need to get enough evidence to trigger an investigation. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a detective in my own quiet way. I attended a senior social group at the community center. I struck up conversations at the grocery store, the library, the pharmacy. I mentioned Silverstone Financial whenever banking came up, and I listened. And people talked. Margaret Torres, $1,034. 67 in unexplained. Account maintenance fees. Last April. She'd called to complain, and they'd refunded half of it. As a courtesy. Making her feel like she was lucky to get anything back. Edwin Walsh, $755. 23 for a premium document storage service he'd never requested. When he pushed back, they produced a document with a signature that looked nothing like his actual signature, but he didn't know how to prove it. Dorothy Kim, $892. 41 Identity Protection Services. She'd been so confused and upset that her daughter had helped her switch banks entirely. James Holloway, $1,247. 15 for a wealth management consultation fee. He was a retired attorney, and he'd threatened to sue. Silverstone had immediately refunded the money and offered him an additional $2,000 for the inconvenience, provided he signed a non-disclosure agreement. He'd signed, taken the money, and never thought about it again, until I asked. By the end of the second week, I had 17 cases. 17 elderly customers, all with similar stories. The fees ranged from $623 to $1,247. The excuses varied, but the pattern was identical: fake services, forged authorizations, and a systematic effort to make the victims doubt themselves. The total amount stolen, $15,394. 32, and that was just from the people I'd managed to find and convince to talk to me. How many others were out there? How many had never noticed? How many had noticed but felt too embarrassed or powerless to fight? I compiled everything into a detailed spreadsheet: names, dates, amounts, specific employees involved, attempts to resolve the issue, outcomes. I cross-referenced the data, looking for patterns in timing, amounts, and methodology. Then I noticed something interesting. The fees had started appearing 9 months ago, March of this year. Before that, none of my contacts reported similar issues. The timing was too precise to be coincidental. I dug deeper, searching through my own statements going back 2 years. Nothing. Clean. Then, in March, the first anomaly, a $53.28 processing fee that I'd barely noticed because it was so small. A test, maybe? A way to see if I'd catch it? I hadn't. So they'd gotten bolder. I checked Harold's statements. Same pattern. A small fee in March, then larger ones as the months progressed. Something had changed at Silverstone Financial 9 months ago. A new policy? A new system? Or maybe a new person? I needed to get inside the bank's corporate structure, and for that, I needed help from someone with access. Her name was Jessica Torres, Margaret Torres's granddaughter. She was 26 years old, a junior compliance officer at Silverstone's regional office, and she was furious when she learned what had happened to her grandmother. "They stole from my abuela," she said, her voice shaking when we met at a coffee shop downtown. "She trusted them for 20 years, and they stole from her." "I know," I said gently. "And from many others. But Jessica, if you help me, you could lose your job. You could face legal consequences. I need you to understand the risk." She set her jaw in a way that reminded me of her grandmother. "What do you need?" "Information. Internal communications, policy changes from the past year, anything related to fee structures or new service packages for senior accounts. Can you access that?" "I can access compliance reports, yes. Internal communications, that's trickier. I need a legitimate reason to request them. What if there was a whistleblower complaint?" Her eyes widened. "Is there?" "There will be. By tomorrow morning, I'm filing complaints with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the state banking regulator, and the bank's own internal ethics hotline. As a compliance officer, wouldn't you need to investigate?" A slow smile spread across her face. "I would. And as part of that investigation, I'd need to review all relevant documentation from the past 12 months. "Exactly. That night, I filed the complaints. I laid out every case, every detail, every pattern I'd discovered. I attached documentation, bank statements, correspondence, sworn affidavits from victims. I made copies of everything and stored them in 3 separate locations: a safe deposit box at a different bank, a cloud storage account, and with Patricia Vance. 3 days later, Jessica called me. I have something. Can you meet? We met at a park this time, more private. She handed me a USB drive, her hand trembling slightly. This could get me fired. Or worse. Thank you, I said simply, taking the drive. What's on it? Everything. There was a new initiative launched in March called Operation Golden Years. It was pitched internally as a way to optimize revenue from mature customer segments. The memo is from Richard Castellano. He's a vice president in the retail banking division. He set quotas for branches to enroll senior customers in premium services, with bonuses for employees who hit their targets. My blood ran cold. Quotas. Yes. And here's the thing. The internal documentation explicitly states that customers should be enrolled through verbal authorization rather than written consent, to streamline the process and improve the customer experience. But the compliance procedures require written consent for any fee-based service. So they deliberately created a system where employees could claim customers had verbally agreed to services that required written authorization. Exactly. And when customers complained, they were told authorization forms existed but couldn't be located due to system issues. In reality, the forms were never created in the first place. Some branches even started forging signatures on backdated forms when customers pushed hard enough. I felt sick. This wasn't a few rogue employees. This was institutional fraud, approved from the top, incentivized through bonuses, and systematically implemented across multiple branches. How widespread is this? Jessica's face was pale. According to the internal reports, 47 branches across 5 states participated. The revenue generated from these optimized enrollments was just over $2. $3 million in the first 6 months. $2. $3 million. Stolen from elderly people who'd trusted their bank, who'd spent their lives saving, who'd done nothing wrong except grow old. There's more. Jessica continued. When the ethics hotline started receiving complaints, yours wasn't the first, by the way. Castellano's team created a crisis management protocol. Complaints were to be resolved with partial refunds and small settlement payments, along with NDAs. The goal was to keep it quiet, contain the damage, and let the complaints age out before any regulatory review. They were counting on people giving up or forgetting. Yes. And it was working. Until you started asking questions. I looked at the USB drive in my hand. This was the smoking gun. This was proof of intentional, organized fraud at the highest levels of the bank. With this, we could destroy them. But I needed to be smart. If I went public too soon, they'd mobilize their legal team, bury evidence, and turn this into a he-said-she-said nightmare that could drag on for years. I needed leverage. I needed to make them understand that fighting would cost them more than surrendering. Jessica, I need you to do one more thing for me. What? I need you to find out who their legal team is, what law firm handles their crisis management, and whether they have directors' and officers' liability insurance. Can you get that information? I think so. Why? Because I'm going to give them a choice. Make this right voluntarily, or I'm going to make this the most expensive mistake they've ever made. Over the next month, Patricia and I worked like we were back at Morrison and Associates, pulling late nights and early mornings. We built a case that was ironclad, incontrovertible, and devastating. We organized the 17 victims into a formal group, all willing to testify. We created a detailed timeline of events, showing the systematic nature of the fraud. We calculated the total damages, $2. 3 million in stolen fees, plus punitive damages, plus the cost of emotional distress, plus interest. But we also did something more important. We documented everything that Silverstone would want to keep hidden. The internal memos showing executive approval. The quota system that incentivized fraud. The crisis management protocol designed to silence victims. The pattern showing this wasn't limited to one branch or one manager, but was a coordinated, multi-state operation. Patricia was brilliant at this. She'd taken the raw data from Jessica's USB drive and transformed it into a narrative that any jury would understand. A major bank had decided that elderly customers were easy targets, implemented a system to systematically steal from them, and then covered it up when people complained. The beauty of this, Patricia said one evening, surrounded by printouts and coffee cups, is that they can't claim ignorance. The paper trail shows executive knowledge and approval at every level. And the quota system proves intent. They weren't making mistakes. They were hitting targets. What about Jessica? I asked. She could face retaliation. She's protected under whistleblower laws, and we have documentation of her role before she contacts any attorney. If they touch her, it's another lawsuit. They're smart enough to know that. I hoped she was right. We also did something that would prove crucial later. We estimated Silverstone's total exposure. If our 17 cases were representative of the 47 branches over 9 months, we could extrapolate the total number of victims and the total amount stolen. The math was horrifying. Using conservative estimates, we calculated approximately 2,800 victims and $8. 7 million in fraudulent fees. And that was just for the 9 months since Operation Golden Years had launched. If they'd been running smaller-scale versions of this scam before, and the evidence suggested they had, the total could be much higher. But here's what made it truly devastating for Silverstone: the legal multiplier. Under banking regulations and consumer protection laws, they could be liable for treble damages, 3 times the actual harm. That meant $26. 1 million in damages alone, not counting legal fees, regulatory fines, and the reputational damage. And then there was the criminal exposure. Wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, elder abuse. These weren't just civil matters, they were federal crimes. If prosecutors decided to get involved, individual executives could face prison time. I looked at the final document Patricia had prepared, a 147-page brief outlining the entire scheme, the evidence, the legal theories, and the potential exposure. It was the kind of document that would make any defense attorney's blood pressure spike. "This is good," I said. "This is very good." "It's bulletproof," Patricia replied. "Now comes the hard part. What do you want to do with it?" That was the question, wasn't it? I could go to the media, trigger a public scandal. I could file a class action lawsuit, drag this through the courts for years. I could hand everything to federal prosecutors and let them decide whether to bring criminal charges. But all of those options had the same problem. They were slow, uncertain, and would give Silverstone time to mount a defense, to spin the narrative, to turn themselves into victims of overzealous regulators or opportunistic plaintiffs' attorneys. I wanted something faster. Something cleaner. Something that would give every penny back to the victims and ensure this never happened again. I wanted surrender. Complete, unconditional surrender. "I'm going to offer them a deal," I said. Patricia raised an eyebrow. "What kind of deal?" "The kind they can't refuse. I'm going to give them exactly one opportunity to make this right on my terms, or I'm going to burn their entire company to the ground. I requested the meeting through formal channels. A certified letter addressed to Richard Castellano, Vice President of Retail Banking at Silverstone Financial, and copied to the CEO, the General Counsel, and the Chairman of the Board. The letter was polite, professional, and terrifying. Dear Mr. Castellano, my name is Robert Chen. I am a customer of Silverstone Financial and have been for 47 years. I am writing to inform you of a matter that requires your immediate attention. I have uncovered evidence of systematic fraud targeting elderly customers across multiple branches. This fraud appears to have been implemented as part of an internal initiative called Operation Golden Years, and has resulted in the theft of approximately $8.7 million from approximately 2,800 customers. I have compiled comprehensive documentation of this fraud, including internal memoranda, compliance violations, victim testimony, and financial analysis. This documentation has been reviewed by a forensic accountant and an attorney specializing in banking fraud. I am prepared to resolve this matter privately, provided Silverstone Financial takes immediate corrective action. To that end, I am requesting a meeting with you and appropriate senior leadership within 5 business days. Should Silverstone decline this meeting or fail to address this matter satisfactorily, I will immediately forward all documentation to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Department of Justice, the State Attorney General's Office, and major media outlets. Time is of the essence. I can be reached at the contact information below. Sincerely, Robert Chen. I mailed it on a Monday. By Wednesday afternoon, I received a phone call from a woman who identified herself as Sarah Brennan, Senior Counsel for Silverstone Financial. Mr. Chen, I'm calling regarding your letter. We'd like to meet with you to discuss your concerns. When and where? Would Friday at 2 p.m. work for you? We can meet at our corporate headquarters downtown, or if you'd prefer a neutral location. Your headquarters is fine. I'll be bringing my accountant and my attorney. There was a pause. Of course. May I ask? Friday at 2 p.m. I'll see you then. I hung up before she could ask anything else. Let them wonder. Let them worry. Friday arrived cold and crisp, the kind of November day where your breath fogs in the air. Patricia and I arrived at Silverstone's gleaming headquarters tower at 1:55 p.m. We'd decided to leave the attorney at home. Having actual legal representation would change the dynamics in ways we didn't want yet. But they didn't need to know Patricia wasn't a lawyer. We were escorted to a conference room on the 23rd floor, all glass and steel and uncomfortable modern furniture. Already seated were 4 people. Richard Castellano, a man in his 50s with silver hair and an expensive suit. Sarah Brennan, the lawyer, younger and sharper. Michael Torres, who was introduced as Chief Risk Officer, and someone whose presence surprised me, David Halloran, the CEO of Silverstone Financial. The CEO. They were taking this seriously. Mr. Chen MS? Vance, thank you for coming. Halloran extended his hand, which I shook briefly. Please sit. Can we get you anything? Water? Coffee? No, thank you. I sat, placing my briefcase on the table. Patricia sat beside me, her expression neutral. Halloran smiled, the kind of practiced smile that had probably charmed shareholders for years. I understand you have some concerns about our operations. We take customer satisfaction very seriously at Silverstone, and we're eager to address whatever issues. Mr. Halloran, I interrupted. Let's not waste time. You know why I'm here. Your team has had 3 days to review Operation Golden Years and the fraud it enabled. So let's dispense with the pleasantries and discuss solutions. The smile faltered. Sarah Brennan leaned forward. Mr. Chen, I think there may be some misunderstanding about. There's no misunderstanding. I opened my briefcase and removed a single sheet of paper, sliding it across the table. This is a summary of the documentation I possess. Internal memos from Mr. Castellano here, approving the systematic targeting of elderly customers. Quota systems incentivizing fraud. Crisis management protocols designed to silence complaints. Financial analysis showing approximately $7 million in fraudulent fees collected from approximately 2,800 victims. Castellano's face had gone pale. Where did you get? That doesn't matter. What matters is that I have it, it's authentic, and multiple copies exist in multiple secure locations. You cannot make this disappear. Halloran's friendly demeanor had evaporated. Mr. Chen, if you're suggesting that Silverstone Financial has engaged in systematic fraud, that's a very serious accusation. Do you have evidence to support? Would you like to see the March 15th memo where Mr. Castellano outlined the revenue targets for Operation Golden Years? I pulled another sheet from my briefcase. Or perhaps the April 23rd email where he congratulated branch managers for creative enrollment strategies? Or maybe the June 10th compliance report that was suppressed because it identified irregularities in senior customer accounts? I laid each sheet on the table as I spoke, watching their faces. Castellano looked like he might be sick. Brennan was furiously taking notes. Torres, the risk officer, had his head in his hands. I have 147 pages of this, I continued. Every memo, every email, every piece of evidence documenting how your bank decided that elderly customers were easy marks and implemented a system to steal from them. And gentlemen, lady, this isn't just a civil matter. This is criminal fraud. Wire fraud. Mail fraud. Elder abuse. Conspiracy. You've committed federal crimes, and I have proof. The room was silent. Finally, Halloran spoke, his voice careful. What do you want, Mr. Chen? I want justice. I want restitution. And I want to make sure this never happens again. Can you be more specific? I pulled out the final document, the one Patricia and I had spent days perfecting. These are my terms. Non-negotiable. You have 48 hours to accept or decline. Brennan took the document, her hands shaking slightly. As she read, her expression shifted from professional composure to barely concealed alarm. You can't be serious, she breathed. I'm completely serious. Every word. Halloran grabbed the document from her and scanned it quickly. His jaw tightened with each paragraph. My terms were simple. Immediate cessation of Operation Golden Years and any similar programs. Full restitution to all victims, 100% of fraudulent fees, plus 20% as compensation for distress and inconvenience. A $5 million fund for financial literacy programs for seniors. Termination of Richard Castellano and any other executives who approved or implemented the fraud. Implementation of new oversight procedures, to be monitored by an independent auditor for 3 years. A public apology and admission of wrongdoing. A guarantee that no victims would face any retaliation, and that Jessica Torres would be protected in her employment. And if we comply with these terms? Halloran asked. Then this stays private. I don't go to the media. I don't file criminal complaints. I don't organize a class action lawsuit. You make it right quietly, and we all move on. And if we don't? I smiled coldly. Then Monday morning, I'm holding a press conference. Tuesday, I'm filing complaints with every regulatory agency that has jurisdiction over banking. Wednesday, I'm meeting with the FBI. Thursday, I'm filing a class action lawsuit seeking treble damages plus punitive damages. And Friday, you'll be explaining to your shareholders why Silverstone Financial stock is in free fall and why several of your executives are being led away in handcuffs. I lean forward. You have 48 hours. Not 48 hours and 1 minute. At 2:01 p.m. on Sunday, if I haven't received written acceptance of these terms, I execute my plan. I suggest you don't test whether I'm bluffing. Mr. Chen. Castellano finally spoke, his voice desperate. You have to understand, the initiative was meant to provide valuable services. Mr. Castellano. I cut him off, my voice ice. You stole from people like Harold Brennan, who spent 40 years delivering mail in rain and snow to build a modest retirement. You stole from Margaret Torres, who cleaned houses for 30 years and saved every penny. You stole from Edwin Walsh, a Korean War veteran. You targeted people you thought were too old, too confused, too weak to fight back. I stood gathering my briefcase. You were wrong. 48 hours. Patricia and I walked out without waiting for a response. They called at 11:47 a.m. on Sunday. 36 hours and 47 minutes after the meeting. They'd used every minute, probably convening emergency board meetings, consulting with their lawyers, running the numbers. Sarah Brennan was on the line. Mr. Chen, we accept your terms. I felt no triumph, no joy. Just cold satisfaction. I need it in writing. Complete, signed acceptance by all parties, plus a detailed implementation timeline. We'll have it to you by 5 p.m. today. 4 p.m. 4 p.m. Agreed. The documents arrived at 3:47 p.m. Patricia reviewed them with a lawyer's scrutiny while I read over her shoulder. Everything was there. Full restitution. The $5 million fund. Castellano's resignation, effective immediately. 2 other VP-level executives gone as well. New oversight procedures. The public apology, scheduled for release the following week. And a clause guaranteeing Jessica Torres's employment and protecting her from any retaliation, with a $2 million penalty if Silverstone violated it. It's good, Patricia said. They didn't try to weasel out of anything. I signed the acceptance document and emailed it back at 4:02 p.m. The checks went out in January. Every victim identified received full restitution plus 20%. Harold Brennan got $747.86. Margaret Torres got $1,241.60. Edwin Walsh got $906.28. All 17 of my original contacts received their money, and Silverstone's investigation, conducted by the independent auditor I'd insisted upon, found an additional 214 victims across the 47 branches. The public apology appeared in full-page newspaper ads and on Silverstone's website. It was appropriately contrite, admitting to systematic failures in oversight and customer service. Without using the word fraud, their lawyers had negotiated that small mercy, and I'd allowed it. The substance mattered more than the semantics. Richard Castellano disappeared from the banking world entirely. Last I heard, he was consulting for a small insurance company in Idaho. The other fired executives faced similar fates. No criminal charges, thanks to my deal, but their careers in finance were over. The industry talks. Everyone knew what they'd done. Jessica Torres was promoted to Senior Compliance Officer at Silverstone's corporate headquarters. She called me every few weeks to update me on the new oversight procedures. The bank had gotten serious about preventing fraud, if only because they knew someone was watching now. The $5 million Senior Financial Literacy Fund launched in February. It provided free financial planning services, fraud prevention education, and advocacy support for elderly customers across all of Silverstone's markets. Margaret Torres's granddaughter was appointed to the fund's oversight board. As for me, I transferred my accounts to a credit union. After 47 years with Silverstone, I was done. But I'd made sure they remembered me. On a cold February morning, I sat in my usual coffee shop, reviewing my accounts on my laptop. Old habits die hard. Everything was in order. Every penny accounted for. My phone buzzed. A text from Harold Brennan, "Coffee this week? First round's on me. I got my money back because of you." I smiled and typed back, "Thursday at 10? His response was immediate, perfect. "And Robert?" "Thank you." I set down my phone and looked out the window at the people passing by on the street. Young and old, hurried and leisurely, each carrying their own burdens and battles. They'd thought I was just another old fool. That had been their mistake. Because the thing about getting old is this: you accumulate knowledge, patience, and perspective. You learn that the loudest voice in the room isn't always the strongest. You understand that power isn't about force, it's about leverage, timing, and knowing exactly where to apply pressure. And most importantly, you learn that underestimating someone because of their age is a mistake you only make once. I finished my coffee and closed my laptop, feeling the winter sun on my face. Somewhere in Silverstone Financial's gleaming headquarters, someone was probably explaining to new employees why they now had to follow 17 new procedures before enrolling any customer in a fee-based service. Good. Let them remember. Let them learn. And let them never forget what happens when they mess with the wrong old man.